Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to bring to you
Supreme!
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Supreme Decisions Legal Minute Podcast, and I am your host, Supreme Decisions. Really. Today, I actually wanted to go and talk about something because it's one of those things where I think most people, again, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty confident in saying that most people don't realize how often there are Supreme Court decisions. Most of us didn't even catch one of the things that happened literally, I believe, days before Thanksgiving, or like the day before Thanksgiving, where the Supreme Court decided or reinforced the right to assemble. There were several churches that wanted to meet in the midst of the COVID restrictions. And if you are someone that follows me, you have seen I've done at least 3 videos where I spoke about the requirement and the ability to enforce the mask policy and giving you a pretty much detailed outline of understanding the difference between want and have to. Something you need versus something you want. And giving you that differentiation and understanding and giving you context to what I would actually call a dependence on something. Because most of us have very little idea or context of the difference between need and want. Now, when we talk about the restrictions that are not necessarily, but they're recommended, let's put it that way. You have restrictions that are recommended. Simply because we're still dealing with a quote-unquote virus. As they placed it, they still don't know how it's contracted. They still don't know how it's spread. They still have no clue of how it works, but it's here. It's there. It's everywhere. And the whole idea of this is something I'll get into later. But as it pertains to law, we're going to talk about the First Amendment today. And we're going to talk about, I believe his name is Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York. Or it's Andrew Cuomo, excuse me. And what he was recommending during the Thanksgiving holidays, the response from the police, and the decision of the Supreme Court. Because now I'm going to read the First Amendment because I often say this. Most people have no idea what these amendments are and what the restrictions are. Because one of the things I give you is the why. And then I give you the how on how to apply them. But now we're going to go to the First Amendment real quick. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. That's 1. Or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's 2. Or abridging the freedom of speech. 3. Or of the press. 4. Or the right of the people to peacefully assemble, which is 5. And to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So within that one amendment, you have 6 parts. Each part has a different meaning, has a different context, and has a different application. Today, we're going to deal with part 5 and the right of the people to peacefully assemble. Now, most people have no clue what that actually means. Simply because most people think the assembly is just something that you're doing at schools or at the grocery store. No, assembly is something where there is a congregate of like-minded people. That's it. You go to the store, you go to a restaurant, there's a bunch of people at that restaurant. You are among like-minded people. You are assembling. If everybody's just standing in a line in an orderly fashion, you are peacefully assembling. This is something that cannot be restricted. Now, during the quote-unquote COVID restrictions, everyone was asked to actually not be more than, I believe it was 10 people at any one time. And I believe that was a restriction that was set about in New York, and the request by Governor Andrew Cuomo for Thanksgiving. One of the things he was doing, he spoke about what they're going to do is limit private gatherings. Because, most people have, well, shit, a lot of us have large families where we often want to congregate during these holidays. Because, nobody really wants to do all the cooking, and then the one person that does the cooking, they want everybody to come over there. And, it is what it is. But Como was actually looking to grab people that were coming in off buses. He was looking to wait till people left the airport. He was also looking to do what they call pandemic sweeps throughout New York. And the police department flat out said, look, we're already $3 billion backwards because of stop and frisk. We're not going to go around peeking in folks' windows. We're not going to go around setting up roadblocks and traffic stops simply because they are checking on if there's 10 or more people in one given place at any given time. Because here's the greatest idea from it. Because the context of it is to stop the spread or slow down the spread. If the New York Police Department had decided to go along with Cuomo's idea, they themselves will be placing themselves into multiple high contamination possibility areas. So now you're putting them at risk by just doing something that is unnecessary. You're forcing them to implement something that is not law just to generate revenue and say you're being tough on something. Understand that. You're forcing the police to do something that's not law just to do something, and you're exposing them to excess danger. Isn't this the exact excuse the police use for shooting people? Because they're constantly being forced to go into the unknown. They don't know who has what, and you don't know what's going to happen. And their greatest idea is to get home because they are taught that everyone is trying to hurt them. And yes, I just paused for dramatic effect because that's a thinking point. Because again, they're already going in reverse because of stop and frisk. Because their attempt to generate revenue has placed them into a poor position. Now, the sheriff refused to enforce it. And just to give you a timeline, June 23rd of 2020, Governor Cuomo essentially canceled New York's Democratic primary. And when it went to appeals court, it reaffirmed the manifest importance of the First Amendment, speech and association's right, even in the face of a global pandemic. So when we were talking about restricting folks that were going to private events, going to private homes on Thanksgiving, that was the exact same question that was set up not only in the midst of New York, but it was set up in the midst of the U.S. as a whole. And it was then struck down because of the First Amendment. Because here's the greatest part about this: everyone has the right to make a decision about their own life. You have the right to do that. But you also must understand the decisions that you make, you also have the right to accept your decisions. I think that is the thing that's in question. Because it's not that people want to assemble. It's not that the restrictions are actually out of line. But they're recommendations. Why? Because just like speeding, it's a safety issue. Just like jaywalking, it's a safety issue. It's not law. You have the choice, or in this case, you had the choice to take yourself out amongst family members, and you have no idea where these fools are coming from. And you always got that one that's doing a whole bunch of extra stuff because they don't believe anything's real until they have it. And then once it happens, everyone in the world is supposed to feel sorry for the decision they made, for the choices they've exercised. And even in understanding this, the greatest part about this whole thing is the simple fact that the November decision of the Supreme Court to block the New York restrictions on attendance at religious worship service and the struggle to contain COVID, and to follow behind the High Court that said single homes of worship for especially harsh treatment, which was actually words used in the decision. Understanding the context behind that, understanding what was truly meant when they were giving this decision. It's not that they don't believe that there is something that is put in place for prevention, but they wanted to make sure, because most people, they're not leaders. Most Americans are followers. I'm going to say that one more time. Most people in America are not leaders. Most of them are followers. And since they are followers, the ideals of doing something that actually limits their exposure or limits their ability to move around, this frightens people. Because again, what happens is now there is just one thing that everybody attempts to control, and that's their change. Because what happens is most people don't realize, as a human being, you're naturally wired to adapt. Your body is made for change. Most of us don't even realize as we grow, change is the only constant that's in our life. And those that are in Florida, if you take them to Alaska, guess what? Their body changes. Their adaptability changes. Their mindset changes. Their growth changes. So when we have this, it goes through the same thing as if you're going to the gym. Your body changes when you exercise something. So when you're exercising your right, their inability to restrict you from doing something. you're also accepting your own independence. You're accepting your lack of dependence upon something. Because what most of us really are looking for is someone else to blame. When you have the court that stands behind, you know what? God gave you that. We can't take it from you. That's the freedom of choice. You have the choice, the option to stand there and stand next to someone you have no idea where they've been, have no idea what they're going through. You have no idea what and who they are around. But you also have the choice to accept the liability for your actions. And this is what this does. And the one thing I loved about it is the simple fact that the police said, we're not going to enforce this foolishness because we have somebody else that's making a decision for people that have never been in that position. I want to say that again. You have a man, Governor Andrew Cuomo, making a decision for the police officers and the people of New York. And he's never been in the police or in a position of understanding the application of law and understanding the inherent dangers of asking them to do something in excess of what they're already doing. I'm going to say that one more time. You're asking them to do something even more of what they are doing in excess. They're already getting in trouble for doing what they're doing. Now you're asking them to amplify it. They're already being held liable for the faults that they are doing. You're asking them to multiply it. And the police are, yeah, I'm not doing that. But this doesn't apply just to New York because it's a United States Supreme Court decision. The United States Supreme Court said there cannot be restrictions placed on choice. Now, do you also want to be cautionary because understanding the leadership totem? Because if you are a leader or in a position of leadership, you are responsible for the actions of your followers, especially if you're leading them into a means of detriment. So if you're telling your followers to come into a building, you're telling your followers to come and congregate closely together when in fact you don't know, don't show, and don't have any real idea of what it is that you're dealing with. How can you combat it? You're asking them to come into something where you don't even know. Because the people that's giving you the information, they don't know how to keep someone safe other than to keep them apart. Now, this one is one of those where it's just to ask a question. Because a lot of times when we're thinking about the First Amendment, we're thinking about what it means to be able to say what I want. I want to say whatever it is I want, and I have the right to say it. But then we go back to every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And a lot of times we're upset about the reaction. Everything we do has a cause and effect. Because every time you do something, you set off a chain of events. You start something else in motion. And you're understanding freedom of association. You also have the freedom of lack of association. Because it is your individual right or ability to come together as a collective, express, promote, pursue, defend, collect, and share ideas. Or you have that exact same right to make a decision to not do it in close proximity, because we have means such as computers. They've even made them small enough to fit in our pockets, because you have the right and freedom of association. It is a human right. It is a political right. It is also a civil right. But it should be done with a conscious choice. And this goes back to one of the things too that I spoke about before, because it's one of the things we talk about when we talk about police officers making decisions. It's called the totality of circumstances. And the totality of circumstances deals with the collective of any situation. It's getting all sides and understanding. Getting all sides and understanding. Then you can make a decision. Because once you have all the information, you can make an informed decision. The problem with this is we don't have all the information. We don't even understand where the information is coming from, and most of us don't even trust the information that's being given to us. So how can we make an informed decision? How can we make a decision and then be angry about a result when you know you don't have all the information to begin with? But understand, still exercising. You still have the responsibility that comes with your exercise. Most of us look at this staying home and all this other stuff and putting on the mask and doing all the extras as pretty much something other than, or you know what? Actually, look, I had a person tell me, you know what? They're taking away my right. I said, no, they're offering you an alternative. Because here's the great part. If I go to a store and the store says, we would like you to put on a mask, they don't offer a mask, and I get irate because I don't want to put on a mask, guess what that tells me? I need to have my own store, or I need to be growing my own food. That way I don't have to go to a store, I don't have to put on a mask, but I then have a responsibility to cultivate what's mine. I have the responsibility of cultivating and protecting what's mine. I have the responsibility of cultivating, protecting, and caring for what's mine. Because the more I do that, the less, quote unquote, restrictions that can be offered to me. Because you don't have the right to just go in somebody else's stuff, go into somebody else's store, go into somebody else's building, go into somebody else's house in the fashion that you want to. Because it's not yours. You can go in your house the way you want to. You can get in your car as you want to. Because most people don't even realize most businesses are licensed or insured or some type of restriction is placed on that business by the state. Most people don't realize that most businesses that don't have state restrictions have international restrictions. They must abide by to remain open because every business is looking for pretty much permission to be a business. There are restrictions placed upon that business. They have guidelines that are set out for that business. That doesn't mean the owner stands by those guidelines. That just means the owner is wanting to continue to make money. Just like when you get up to go to your job. Had a young lady complain to me last week, oh, my job doesn't care about us because we don't even get masks and 9 people at our job has caught COVID and there's 40 people there. So that means you only have pretty much 25% of your workforce that's gone. But you are making a conscious choice to continue to work there. You are continuing to make a choice to assemble and accept the consequences for your decision. But you want to blame the job. You want to blame someone else instead of taking it for yourself and upon yourself to do what you feel is necessary to protect you. You aren't cultivating you. You aren't protecting you. You're not taking care of you. And that decision is just that. It's an option. It's the ability to. It's a decision to. And it's conscious. The sad thing is most of us are not making conscious decisions to do anything other than. Now, we also looked at the fact that a lot of us were, even myself, I was kind of looking at, one president picking literally 3 Supreme Court justices. While understanding and, the court that we have is an old court. Understanding the ideals that we're used to live with are no longer available. And understanding that thing that I talked about a little while earlier called change. The world is very different now. Most of us didn't understand, that's old enough to remember. There was a song where the hook, I can't remember the exact song that it came from, but the hook was the world is very different now. The world is very different now. The world is very different now because the world shut down in 2020. Most of us that made it through, because 2020 was the year I was pushed mentally to a breaking point because I lost 5 family members, 2 due to COVID or COVID complications, and 3 through other means. And then one of the people that was the closest person to me that I love probably the most had a stroke, became deathly ill, and it's one of those where not only do you question what you're doing, you question things around you, you question things that are in front of you. But you also look at your decisions. Because a lot of us look externally for happiness. A lot of us look externally for those things that I spoke about. Cultivation, protection. Because most of it is idealized. And with me, the context of basically where I'm going with this is most of us have someone close to us where you can lean. I literally spend 95% of my life in isolation. And when you keep having loss after loss after loss after loss after loss, that isolation becomes heavy. God has blessed me with wide shoulders. God has blessed me with a lot of strength. But I can definitely think about the nights I spent on my knees. The nights that I stay up because I'm thinking about the decisions that I've made. The time that I long for something else. Because there's even been times I've wanted assembly. Times I want to be around someone else. But even then, in the back of my mind, I think about the totality of circumstances. Think about my options. Because then I think, how long do I really want to be around someone else? How long do I want to put up with somebody else's shit? How long do I want to listen to somebody else's ideas? How much do I even care about it? Because I've spent so much time alone. I've spent so much time in isolation. I've spent so much time away from others. If 2020 has taught me nothing else, it's taught me appreciation. I appreciate those that are in my life. I appreciate those that support me. I appreciate those that go that extra mile for me. Because when you look at the fact that I've actually kind of reconstructed how my life goes. I've talked about certain entities. I've talked about the building. I've talked about direction. And now I've placed myself in a position where I'm going into the most uncomfortable I've been in probably 10 years. Because I'm going to a point where I am 100% self sufficient. I am no longer depending on anybody else for anything at any given moment. And while that's scary, that's my exercise. My choice to not assemble. My choice to live in isolation. And even my choice to put on a mask. And it's funny because sometimes I'll have on a mask and it's one of those things because I don't half time I don't even remember, so I actually have one that just sits on my face. Because if someone is not being rude and they're asking me to put it on, I pretty much will put it on. But if it's one of those where they're attempting to be boisterous and show their ass, yeah, they can kiss mine. Because it's still my choice. Just like it's my choice to patronize someone's business. It's like it's my choice to go and sit in somebody's church. That's why it's my choice. Not the police's, not the choice of the governor. Because even here, you heard me speak about here in Texas, Governor Abbott had spoke about, oh, we're going to have a mandatory this and mandatory that, and blah, 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 blah. And it was funny to me because most of the time while I was down in Houston, there was no real shutdown. There was no lockdown. I even spoke about how the courts were still open, and then right after I did like 2 or 3 shows about the courts being open, all of a sudden now nobody can go into the building. One of the videos I did inside the courthouse is now deleted. Thank you, YouTube, because I actually didn't keep the original from that one. But it's funny because those restrictions were put up, but nobody enforced them. Yes, there were businesses that were closing because, again, the businesses have very little choice. You either make money our way or you close. Because there was even a place like Walgreens. Walgreens, I go get my Arizonas from. Love it. Walgreens made sure that you had a mask. I even did a quick story about a couple of grocery stores. If they wanted you to wear a mask, they gave you one. They wasn't assholes about it. If you didn't want to wear a mask, it's on you. But we're here. We're giving you a mask. We're giving you all the other things that we were told that we're supposed to have. But they're not being assholes about, no, you don't have to wear a mask. And then I get here, back here to El Paso, and then I'm looking around, and it's pretty much business as usual. Other than they just don't want you sitting around inside. So they've placed outside seating. They've made it comfortable where they can bring you your stuff to your car. You don't have to wear a mask. You can sit behind in the car and be waited on. You can sit at the table and be waited on. Even something as simple as if they make a mistake on a drink, guess what? That's your drink anyway. They can't take it back. So when you're looking at things, understand some things are not what they're looking at, what you're looking at as a choice. Some things are not set on those laurels of how you want to see life. And just because you see it one way doesn't mean it's that way. Because most of these businesses, because even myself, we have things that need to be done. Not only to protect us and protect our employees, but to protect you. Or at least we're told they're set for protection. Because again, we're still dealing with someone where we don't have all the information. And the people that has given us the information don't know how anything works. But yet they're going to vaccinate you for something that they have no clue of what it is. And they're asking you to make a decision for you. You have the right to assemble. You have the right to do what it is that you like. You can go gather around a whole bunch of people that you have no clue of what they're doing, but you also have the right to accept the responsibility of your choices. That's all I have for today. I love you guys. Keep going. Let's keep growing. Keep supporting the podcast. It's 99 cents, $4.99, and $9.99. And also grab you a tier on the website. One of the tiers will fit you. Love you guys. I'll see you next week. And this is Supreme Decision. I'm out.